Doug Ferguson is our next speaker. We're going to talk about a little bit about, I don't know what we're going to talk about here. Doug, are you there, Doug?
Yeah, can you
What's the
hear me?
title? Yes, we can. What's the title of your presentation?
Oh, you didn't get the memo?
I didn't.
I went with legacy,
Oh, there we
you
go.
know, regenerative legacy summit. So I thought I'd surprise everybody instead of talking about marketing.
Okay. Okay. Well, I love it.
So
Um, yep. And you, am I right? You are first generation. Like it's
uh that's a tricky question. If I was a part of the family farm, I'd be the fifth.
oh, okay.
But I'm
Okay.
not a part of the family farm yet. I started my own deal, and then I think to the family's disappointment, in a way, it blew up. And that's my full-time occupation. So I really don't have time to work with my dad.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And that's I guess that's kind of what I see is you started basically with nothing and built it. And so while you're fifth generation, you're kind of first generation in that you're started from scratch and build a really good business. I've been to Doug's school, visited with him on the phone multiple times and text on occasion about marketing questions um, and so yeah, let's jump right in, Doug. Thanks for being part
Okay.
of this.
So yeah, I guess I'll just go ahead and get with it. I decided to use that word legacy since it's the Regenerative Legacy Summit. And for those of you that have been to my schools, I kind of really like to break things down to the ridiculous and get first things first. So that's why I decided to just pull that one word out and talk about it. So I've got to go with the definitions. And it's an amount of money or property left to someone in a will. And so when I talk about legacy, this is something that I haven't done yet. Most of us that are on here haven't done it yet, because we haven't left anything in a will. So for that reason, I can only speak about from the context of my own personal observations from people in the community and conversations that I've had with people that have gone through the marketing schools. And the second part of the definition, it's a long-lasting impact on other people's lives, particular events or activities that took place. Before I move to that one, I should talk about money first. It's really interesting, Jared. Since you went through the school, I've started asking the classes, why do we want money? And a lot of people kind of shrug their shoulders, but money really only does two things. It buys us the goods and services that we need, and it also allows us to extend our reach beyond our own presence. And I'll kind of expand on that, a little bit later. It's really odd to me that this industry will always brag about producing food for the world while doing it in red ink. And if we're running in red ink, we're not meeting our own personal needs. So therefore, we can't even get to the wants. And believe me, when you get to the wants side, it gets to be a lot more fun. Um, the problem with that is then we tell our kids, it's a labor of love. You clock in at the age of 5, you don't clock out till the day you die. You're dirt rich, cash poor. You've heard all of those. I don't need to go through the list. But then we turn around and we ask the wrong question. How do we retain our kids? To me, the only difference between retain and restrain is the use of handcuffs. We have to attract our youth. I mean, we're not attracted to anything that's repulsive. We're attracted to things that get our attention, things that we like, things that we want to be a part of. So by telling our kids these other things, it's a labor of love. You'll never have any money. That's not attractive. So then that brings me to this next point. We have to get to this next level. I mean, ever since I was riding bulls when I was a kid, it was always about getting to the next level, the next level. Even through business and my marketing schools, it's all about going to the next level. The only way we're going to get there is we have to get this idea in our heads that our operations must be a benefit to others. And I really like cattle. That's one of the reasons I got in the cattle business is I just really like cattle. The whole point of owning cattle is they have to make our lives better, and it's not just through food, leather goods, and byproducts, but we have to make money. That way we can pay for those goods and services that we need. The best definition that I've ever heard on success is that it's progressive realization of a worthy ideal. So when we break that down, progressive means that we're always chasing it. We never arrive at it. There's always that higher level. And then the worthy ideal is sometimes I think people look at it differently because we have this inferiority complex a lot of times. People think, oh, my operation's small. Do I even matter? Those kinds of things. The worthy ideal means is the idea worthy of you? Because as we all know on this chat right now, we're in this business for the long haul. I mean, there really isn't a retirement age. You're going to trade your life to do this job. So is it worth it? And so I kind of thought about success for this presentation. I broke it down into 3 bullet points. One is giving. So once our needs are met, that's where we can begin to extend our presence or our reach beyond our own presence. We can give money. Trades, I think, is pretty straightforward. In the marketing schools I talk about, when you sell an overvalued animal, you're helping the buyer because you're selling to him what he wants. We step back into the market, we buy undervalued animals, so we're helping the seller. We can do that with livestock, hay trades that I do, any of those kinds of things. And then service. And this one always kind of gets some funny looks in the marketing schools when I talk about providing service. The cow-calf guy provides a service by producing the calves that the stocker operator will purchase. The stocker operator guy, he weans them, vaccinates them, puts some weight on them, and then it is his job to sell those bulletproof cattle to the feed yards. Of course, then the feed yards finish them for the packer. The packer sells it to the purveyor, who sells it to the retailer. Everywhere in there, there's service. One thing that's odd to me right now is how all these ranchers are cheering on McDonald's for suing the packer. I don't know why you would want anybody in that chain trying to harm somebody else in that chain. And granted, yes, there's the packer collusion. I've been a part of that. But we also provide other services on our ranch. And I've kind of made a list of them. People that have come through the marketing schools have talked about, they do hunting leases. Guy from South Dakota, it was pheasants. Guy from Kansas, it was white-tailed deer. There's people around here that have fixed up their old barns and now, they're party barns. You have fundraisers, weddings there. And some of the large ranches in the U.S. and the feed yards have sent their employees to my marketing schools on the operations dime. And we could even break it down to providing jobs or internships, job shadowing, those kinds of things. Now, since I've talked about those, I felt like I should probably cover the law of compensation a little bit before I get further into this legacy deal. The law of compensation is broken down into 3 things. The need for what you do, and kind of like Alan was just talking about, we provide food, but it's not just that we provide food. There's all the other benefits of raising cattle that go along with it. One thing that I find odd, Jared, I got into rotational grazing and soil health because if I got into those things, I could grow more grass. If I could grow more grass, I could run more cattle. It seems really weird to me now that people are actually getting into the livestock business for the sole purpose of soil health. And then marketing the animals and making money is kind of an afterthought. The second part of the law of compensation is your ability to do it. And the third one is the difficulty there is in replacing you. I got a real good friend of mine. He owns 100,000 head feed yard, and he's told me that he has employees on his payroll that he pays 6 figures. He said if one of them would come in and ask for a raise, or I'm going to go take a job somewhere else, he'd give them the raise. If a different employee making 6 figures came in and made the same demand, he'd hold the door open for them as they left. So your ability to do it and the difficulty there is in replacing you will affect that law of compensation. So why do you do what you do? And I find it interesting. You got that flip chart behind you, and the top word is why. The best mentor that I ever had in my life, Bob Proctor, and you can see him in the movie The Secret. told me once that the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you discover your purpose. And I got a little bit hung up on the whole discover your purpose because I thought, okay, so that means I have to think about these things and manifest this stuff. And he's like, no, 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 no. He says, you don't determine your purpose, you discover it. And that kind of took things to a different level. It required a lot more mental capacity, a lot more creativity, and those kinds of things. Now, I felt actually pretty fortunate going through this because I think, like a lot of us on here, I felt like I discovered my purpose at a very young age. I mean, I just fell in love with the idea of raising cattle. The only reason I got good at the marketing was if I could make money raising cattle, I could own more cattle. And then that kind of evolved into the marketing schools and things from there. But purpose really doesn't have anything to do with money. We get our satisfaction from working at our purpose. And the purpose that you're working towards should be something that others will benefit for a long time, even after we're gone. And the best example I could think of there was Mother Teresa. I mean, she's legendary. Even if you're not Catholic, you've heard of her and are aware of her work. You know, she extended her mission all over the globe. Now, some people think, well, Mother Teresa was poor. She never had any money. I look at it a little bit differently, Jared. Mother Teresa to me was a very, very wealthy person. She got to do her mission work all over the world. She got other people to pay for all of it. So money really doesn't have anything to do with your purpose. So it goes back to that other bullet point I had on a slide here just a moment ago, being able to extend your service beyond your presence. So if we make money, you can give it to people like Mother Teresa to continue her work. So if we get good and we're profitable and we donate to a good charity, we're extending our service beyond our presence. So discovering your purpose, just break it down to that word why. Just act like a 3-year-old and ask why. Why do I choose to be in this industry or run this business? This might be a little bit raw for some people watching this, but I feel like I have to say it, Jared. If your response is this is the only thing I've ever known, I feel like you haven't experienced enough. You need to get out. There could be a calling out there for you that will probably mean a lot more to you. And what do I love to do? I think everybody would probably have the answer to that one. And what's one thing I'm supremely qualified to do? And who do I serve? And I've kind of already touched on that. Um, it's funny in the marketing schools, I'll ask this question, how many of you think you're a beef producer? And almost every hand in the room goes up. And then I'll challenge them, well, go home, peel the hides off your animals and send them to me. You'll still have the beef. We have to take care of 100% of the critter. And if we take care of 100% of the critter, the beef that is only 40% will take care of itself. So where I go with that is who is your customer? Who is it that you're really serving? Identify that customer and find out ways to serve them better. How are we doing on time, Jared? I feel like I'm talking. Okay, we're good.
Yep, yep, you're doing good. You're about halfway through, so doing
So
great.
I feel like I want to talk about this too. I feel like this is important. So, you mentioned, I kind of started my operation from scratch, and not everybody did. There are some people that are born with a silver spoon in their mouth. There are people that are born with a plastic spoon or no spoon. I don't care if you had a spoon or not, but if you are born with a silver spoon in your mouth, that means that there was probably a generation or two ahead of you that paid for that ranch with Herefords or sheep. And they left you that legacy. We kind of run into this problem that if I'm the fifth, sixth, seventh generation on this ranch, we seem to think we inherently know what we're doing. And I got a good friend of mine. If he sees this, he's going to realize I'm about to bust on him a little bit here. But he inherited his ranch, millions and millions of dollars. And they decided they were tired of calving cows and snowbanks. So this year he decided they were going to switch their calving date from calving in snowbanks to fall calving. And what he did was he sold his spring calving cows at a time they were really undervalued. And he replaced them with fall calving cows at the time they were really overvalued. There's actually a way to market those animals where he could have sold his spring calving cows and got paid the switch, but he went about it the other way. So he paid into the market $1,200 per head for the privilege of switching calving dates. And over 250 head, that would be $300,000. If you started from scratch and you're still having to pay for everything, your banker wouldn't let you make that move. But when you inherit millions of dollars free and clear, you can. I feel like doing things like this are a great disservice to that previous generation that made the sacrifices and all the hard work that they did. So we owe it to that previous generation to be intelligent and to be very intentional about the things that we're doing today to honor that legacy that they left behind. And I've spent a little time around Jared, and I know he's going to ask me this question, so I just went ahead. I put the slide in for you, Jared, because I know he's going to ask me, well, what do you want your legacy to be? And to me, it's not so much what I leave behind for my daughter, it's what I leave in her that counts. We have this idea that we need to build a business that's worth passing on. That's not good enough. That isn't reaching that next level. I have to instill the mental faculties in her head, and I've made her this promise that by the time she graduates high school, she will be able to step into this operation and be able to run it and do an outstanding job of it. Um, so you see that photo on the left, she's got her calculator out. We get truancy letters from the school every semester, and it's not because she's sick or skipping to go play basketball. I pull her out of school and I take her to auctions with me. And so that she was calculating up to see what a potload of cattle had just sold for. But here's why I feel like this is so important that we have to put the right things into our kids. I've seen this play out too many times. The old man makes all the decisions on the operation until the day he dies. And then we have these adult children that are 50, 60 years old, have never made a big decision on their own, and they're not equipped to do it. And yeah, I hate bringing this up, but too many times it's ended in suicide. So to me, leaving that legacy behind is what we leave in our kids. And then the other little bullet point down there on the bottom is be authentic. There's all these societal pressures that, oh, you got to leave this business for your kids, or you got to do this and blah, 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 and this and that. And we just copy. The only way to really truly be legendary is to do your own thing and go out and do it your own way. And if we leave that behind in our kids, then I feel like we've really truly left a legacy behind. And then that's the last slide I got, Jared. There's my marketing information. There's my contact information, phone number, email address. I'll mention the Doug's Market Intel blog that I write every Friday. You can find it on Beef Magazine or Beef Producer, any of the Farm Progress websites. And if we got time, Jared, if there are any questions, we can do that now.
Yeah, that sounds good. I appreciate this is kind of a deviation from your normal wheelhouse. But I think it's great. Yeah, I appreciate it. You diving into what legacy actually is. So if anybody has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We can run through this. So we've got from the students who've been to your school before, there, Doug, those that have really kind of taken off and run with it, what are the characteristics that they have? Like, are there certain things that stand out to you that were like,
Yeah.
Even be the non-measurable things, but what stands out to you when you look at them and they're like, man, they're successful while other people maybe flounder.
There's I'm seeing an interesting trend develop. I get all kinds of text messages, testimonials. They come in pretty regular anymore. And one trend that I've noticed is there's a difference between ranch managers and what I would call the owner operator type. The ranch managers will text me and say, "Hey, we did this trade," and it's a good solid trade. I mean, it's the solid trade that you can run a good business on. The owner operators are the ones that send me text messages that those are the monster trades. And I just did a private school for a group of ranch managers. There was out of maybe 10 of them there. And I was kind of curious about it. And I was like, what's your first goal? Like, what's your primary goal when you get up in the morning? They're like, well, I got to provide for my family. And I'm like, well, how do you do that? I'm like, go to work. I said, what happens if you get fired? And they're like, oh crap, I wouldn't be able to provide for my family. So what I think I'm seeing happen is if you're a ranch manager and you have that W-2 job, they're a little bit more conservative because they don't want to get fired. Where the owner operator, they're looking at something much bigger, handing on that family business and doing things for their kids. They're a lot more aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of I guess it's kind of like the parable of the shepherd versus the hireling, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the ranch manager, he's going to get paid no matter what. The owner's like, this is the legacy that we're building. It's sink or swim for him. So,
So I did challenge those ranch managers that were in that private school. They all have their own personal operation. And I'm like, well, what if you took that mentality from your personal operation with you to work? What would happen then? And there were a lot of smiles when I kind of mentioned that. But
yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay. Um, well, we actually do have a little bit of extra time here. We are waiting. We're going to see if Mark Shepard is going to be able to join in. He is somewhere in Africa trying to get cell phone service, so at least he can call in. So we have a plan B. Part of that plan B might be extend this Q&A for a little bit, and then we'll do some recap. So um, if we don't get Mark Shepard here, we'll get him on a podcast later on, and we'll have the opportunity to listen to him. So he was one of the ones that I know I had some questions come in before about it. So we'll go through some of these questions, and then in a nutshell, Jen asks, "What do you teach in your marketing school? Is it sell by marketing or direct to consumer?" It is sell by marketing, but
it's sell by
that's
marketing. I don't do any direct marketing stuff. There are other people that are much more qualified to speak on that than I am. I won't talk about LRPs or hedging or anything like that. It's basically how to use sell by marketing to be self-hedged in the cash markets.
yeah. And can you kind of expound on what those principles are since we've got a little bit of time and this, sorry if this puts you on the
Yeah,
spot.
to make it real short, Robert Kiyosaki talks about financial literacy, so I just hijacked his term. My goal in those marketing schools is to be able to give people market literacy so that you can look at market reports or watch your local, sale at your local sale barn and be able to determine what you have in your inventory that is overvalued and be able to identify an undervalued replacement animal. That's probably the shortest, most concise answer I could give you. Otherwise, we're probably going to go on and on.
Yeah. Okay. And that kind of ties into the question, maybe using the scenario that you had. Nathan asked a question, what would you have done differently to swap those spring calving cows for fall calving cows? Can you kind of,
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. We're seeing this right now. These late spring calving cows that are in the first period, nobody wants them. And there was a time where those fall calving cows were in their first period and nobody wanted them. They were terribly, terribly undervalued, but those spring pairs or heavy spring beds were overvalued at the time. So what he should have done is he should have made the swap sooner in the year and sold his spring calving cows when they were overvalued, because what he ended up doing was paying a premium for it at the time of year he did it.
Yeah.
He didn't.
So,
The relationships between those animals exist and they change throughout the year. And he didn't take advantage of the relationship when it was in his favor.
gotcha. So if he, because he didn't act on that, and the only thing you know is what the market is today, if he had done the math and looked at things, he would have realized that he was selling the undervalued
Yep.
and
There's so like
decided
on the
not.
cow trades, there's you got the intrinsic value and the actual value. He actually sold value into the market. Or no, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The cows he sold had a value, but the cows he bought had a higher value, but he paid more for that value than what they were worth. If he'd have done it the other way around, he could have sold some value into the market and got paid more for that value than it was worth. There's algebraic equations, step-by-step process through that.
Mm. Yeah, and
It might sound complicated when I say it, but it's just simple algebra. It's really not that hard when you see it.
yeah, yep, it's kind of a different way of looking at it. The way that I explain it to people is, basically you sell what is overvalued on the marketplace, replace your inventory with what is undervalued, but also knowing yourself, knowing your context, knowing what you can handle, knowing what you like to do. I know there's a lot of people that even trade between species, but if you don't love sheep and you're not set up to run sheep, that's probably not a good trade, right? So there's some things that just because the math says you're like, I don't need to, I don't need to do that. Don't need to go
Yep.
there. So,
And I've run into this in the marketing school. Sometimes people show up and they got an idea put in their head from somewhere else that they should get out of cows and get into stockers when they really, really love cows.
mhm,
Problem is, after they come to the marketing school, then they realize they didn't have to get out of cows.
mhm. Good. Meaning you can still apply sell by marketing with the traditional cow calf. Like
Yeah,
you don't,
there
um,
for some of them, they probably would have had to, instead of this whole idea of keep a heifer and run her till she's old enough to vote, we might have to market some of those females,
mhm,
selling bred cows or pairs and then replace them with something else, whether it's a heifer that you keep or buying some other cows. And that's a bit of a paradigm challenge for some people, but the answer isn't always just get out of cows and get into stockers. Because I'll tell you this, if all you've ever known is cows and calves, you pretty much only know the problems that you have on your ranch.
mhm.
If you're going to step into a sale barn environment and start buying stocker cattle, you're going to get a PhD in animal health.
Yeah. Yep. So again, knowing yourself, knowing your context, knowing your team, a lot of those things. Talk a little bit about, and then we'll dive into a couple other questions here, but about the other things that we manage in inventory besides just the livestock,
Yeah,
feed, money,
so
time.
there's there's the original inventory triangle that I think a lot of people are familiar with of feed, money, and livestock. And based off some of the feedback that I've gotten from some of those large feed yards and ranches, they keep sending an employee and sending another employee, and they're paying for these employees. And I asked one of them, I developed a pretty good relationship with him. I was like, why does your ranch keep paying for these people to come to the school? And he said they believe in promoting from within, but there's only so many ranch manager positions available. So they feel like the way they judge part of their success is if their employees leave for a better job on another operation, if they can help them get to that point. And then that kind of led me to thinking, okay, so people are the foundation. So if you see that inventory triangle of feed, money, and cattle, I put people down at the bottom. And really, money in this auction method that we use for marketing cattle only exists for people. So people have to be a component of that. And then time changes all things. Over time, the size of your bank account will change, your feed inventory changes, and the cattle that you have in inventory change. So on the outside of that inventory pyramid, I draw it in like a red line, and that red line represents time because time will change everything inside that pyramid.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. Good. And again, I know this is kind of high level, and the the way you structure your class, I think, is genius. You know, a lot of the mindset that you need on day one, and then the more into the tactics on day two. In the summit, we try to balance that as well. Like tactics without the proper mindset just leads to frustration. And so somebody asked a question, how are you teaching your daughter or setting up your daughter to be ready to tackle the running of the operation?
Yeah. So when she was born, I went to the sale barn. I bought her 5 head of calves. And, I've just been doing sell by trades. We don't have the traditional, 529 or ESA savings account. And so what I've told her ever since she was little, that as long as she's living here, she will own cattle. She will be expected to work on the farm. And so by giving her ownership of these cattle, and she's got her own brand that we use for her calves, she gets, the checks all come in her name. But she's learning those skills of stockmanship, taking care of the animals, balancing, the checkbook. She does have to pay her own bills out of that account. And I feel like up to this point, it's working pretty well because she'll look at her check and, the sale barn took a commission out. Well, why do they need that? All they did was run them through the ring and the auctioneer talked funny for 30 seconds and they took this big chunk of my check. She noticed the beef checkoff takes money out of her check, and boy, that upset her. So at least she's learning to kind of watch her money. But I kind of want her, what I've told her is regardless of whether she chooses to raise cattle for a living or she goes on and does something else, everything she's going to learn from this group of cattle that she's trading will transfer over to anything else she decides to do in life. And that's the part that I really want her to take away from it. And the other thing is, if she does decide to go to college or something, we've got the option. We can liquidate all of her cattle, pay for school, or, we could just pay for school off the income of those cattle. But I'm trying to use her herd that I set her up with to start her for that next phase of life. So, she's not having to borrow a lot of money or going student loan debt for an education.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And then that kind of ties in, but Thomas asked, what did you say about what legacy means when planting seeds in your kids? Oh,
It's what I leave in her. So I want her to have those mental faculties to be able to run a business, and go on and be successful. And, it could be anything. She plays a lot of basketball, super competitive there. We're those crazy parents that have to drive over an hour one way to practice because the local teams aren't good enough. But I have a lot of discussions with her. I'll point stuff out. Hey, you learned this lesson today on the basketball court. And she's frustrated about it at the moment. But I'm like, look, you're learning the lesson now. The test will come later in life because these lessons that she's learning on the basketball court will also transfer over to life. So I'm just kind of trying to put those ideas in her head. And it's kind of funny. I did this morning. Kobe Bryant, legendary basketball player, has a lot of great speeches that are all over YouTube. And this morning when she woke up, I just turned on YouTube, had one of them Kobe speeches playing in the background, and the very first thing Kobe started talking about was purpose. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I'm going to talk about today. And one thing I've noticed is when dad says something, kind of in one ear out
wow.
the other, but when somebody like Kobe saying the same thing, she pays attention.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that as well. And I think that's great for our kids to have mentors
And
other than their parents at the right times, especially when they're ready for it. Your daughter's 14, 15,
13,
13.
13.
Okay. Yeah.
And you mentioned the mindset. We forked out the big bucks and we sent her to what they call a shooting college. And that shooting college spent a lot of time. I mean, it was 2 days, pretty intense. And they spent a lot of time talking to them girls about mindset, and then she's kind of like, oh, yeah, maybe dad ain't really so crazy spending all this time talking about mindset. And they put another good idea in her head that she shared with me, I thought was fantastic. But they told those girls to act in a way that demands questions, break the mold, do something different, do something that's going to get people's attention.
Yeah. Let's say that again. Act in a way that demands
Act in a way
questions.
that demands questions.
Interesting. Interesting. Huh. Yeah, well, you've studied a lot on the mindset piece. Tony Robbins, a great motivational speaker. He teaches that success is 95% mindset, 5% skills. What do you think? Do you think that ratio is right? And where,
I I think he's pretty close. One thing that helped really propel my bull riding career was a book called Psycho Cybernetics. And, a lot of the old bull riders would say that, bull riding's 90% mental and 10% physical. And I kind of disagreed with them. I thought it was 90% mental and 10% between your ears.
uh-huh.
I mean, mindset to me is everything. You
Yeah.
can learn the mechanics and you can have the mechanics down, but if you don't have the right mindset and the right attitude, you'll never hit that higher level. And I noticed there was a big change when I went from riding amateur to pro. And then as I was trying to move up through the pros, there was a huge difference. I mean, at 18, 19 years old, Jared, I couldn't explain it. I didn't know what it was, but you could see it. Those guys that went on to the PBR had a completely different mindset. They were different from the rest of us. There's a reason that they get to ride on TV for millions of dollars, and it's all in their head.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's why we try to find this balance. You can go and find the skills on YouTube. You can YouTube all of these presenters' talks pretty much. You can go and watch them. That there's something about being in an immersive experience, even though it's virtual, that if you do the rules that we ask, forget what you already know, give 100%, stay present, that there's a transformation that happens and that growth, just as what Alan Williams explained, that happens in the soil. For us, it can happen in the soul and it can be exponential and it can be immediate. And I, that's my hope for all of you guys here. And kind of as we talk through, I'm going to, we've got about 20 minutes. And Christine, just can you give me a thumbs up that you are ready to go on the half hour? Or go ahead and unmute. I think we have you up next. Is that right? Um, as we're talking through here, I'm actually going to share a survey that I put together. Last time it was pretty interesting, Doug, when I shared this survey of the challenges that we're faced. Well, let me just ask you, what do you think the number one challenge is amongst farmers and ranchers right now, Doug?
Um, I just see this list in my head right now, getting longer and longer. But I'm still going to come back to the mindset because, um, yeah, I'm looking at the list you have up there right now, the
Yeah.
poll you
So
put up
can you
there.
guys see that? Can you guys see that? Okay. I think it's pretty
I,
self-explanatory how you walk through this. Just answer the questions. Most of them are you choose one on question one, two, and then on one and two, and then on three, you can do multiple for ones that apply. On four, choose the top three, and then five is a write-in answer. If there's somebody that you would love to hear from, type their name in here. And we're gonna share these results a little bit later because I think it's kind of fascinating. This is a completely random cross segment worldwide, people that are enthused about regenerative agriculture. So yeah, what do you see as number one there? And it maybe it's not on this list.
think those are all good ones, but I'll share. Farm Progress had a survey that they released earlier this year, And it was talking about the drinking habits of people in agriculture, and those numbers amongst people that drink daily and binge drink and things like that to me were alarmingly high. And I think the reason people drink is that just to numb their mind, which to me still comes back to the mentality of being able to handle the stress and pressures that we face daily. That's one thing I feel like is different for us. I mean, the W-2 employee, they get to clock out and go home. The entrepreneur, I mean, we wake up with it and we take it to bed with us.
Yep. Yeah. So far, it looks like we've had 19 people answer. The same as last time. The majority are saying profitability. 52% are saying profitability is the number one concern. Finding land is number two. Of the opportunities, this is growing. I wonder if I can share my screen and see this in real time. This might motivate. So why did I put this together? I mentioned it briefly, but it's not so much for our benefit as it is to be able to help you, not only in this presentation, but in subsequent presentations that we do, to get the help that you need. Sometimes in marketing, they say sell what people want and deliver what they need. And I think I agree with you. Like mindset is where it is. But if you're going to go, Doug, and you're going to ask a rancher, hey, how's your mindset? How do you feel? How do you feel about the market right now? How do you feel about, and talk about mindset and emotions? How do you think that's going to go over?
I can tell you how it's going to go over. There was so I was talking about how our feelings and our emotions affect our business. I cover that in the marketing school. And I remember that school we did up in Deadwood a couple years ago. There's this cowboy sitting in the second row, man. He's got his arms folded across his chest and he says, I'm not going to sit here and talk about my feelings. I'm like, that's great because nobody in here wants to hear it. But I think what people need to be aware of is how those feelings and that attitude does affect the results that we get.
Absolutely, right. There's a cycle, and maybe you learned it from Bob Proctor. I appreciate you ad-libbing here. But maybe you learned it from Bob Proctor, but we call it the tier cycle. Thoughts lead to emotions that lead to actions that lead to results. Thoughts, emotions, actions, results, TEAR. And so we focus on the results and we're saying, man, we're not profitable. And so we start to dive down. Well, is it a gross margin issue? Is it a overhead issue? Is it a turnover issue? What's going on there? And I take a step back and I say, well, yeah, we need to know all those things, but let's go to the roots. What are the thoughts and the emotions that got you that result? Either that debt or lack of profitability. Or on the opposite side, what are the thoughts and emotions that have gotten you to that level of success? What do you think about that cycle, Doug?
The way Bob talked to me was exactly how you explained it. It's thoughts, feelings, and actions. Your feelings come from the subconscious mind. Our thoughts are what control those feelings. Now, there is an English teacher, went through the marketing school a couple years ago, and oh man, I really better brush up on my nouns and verbs and this and that. Thought is a noun, and we cannot control the thoughts that pop into our heads. What we can control is our thinking. Just because a thought popped in our head doesn't mean we have to get involved with it. And, I fight this daily. Thought pops in my head and I'm like, nope, don't want to think about that. I need to kick that out and think about this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning to control that thinking or what we get involved with is probably a critical skill and extremely tough to master.
And yeah, any tools or techniques that you've found to manage to manage your thoughts, because statistics say we have some 60,000 thoughts, I have no idea how they measure that. 60,000 thoughts a day, and 2/3 of them on average are negative. So that means 40,000 negative thoughts on the average person are going through their head every day. And again, as I quoted Myron Golden yesterday, we are the only ones who have heard every negative thought about ourselves. And so you
Yep.
think 40,000 negative thoughts a day compounded over a lifetime, man, the odds are kind of stacked against us, right? How are we ever hope to be successful?
And that's, we're bombarded with negative messages. I mean, look at this dumpster fire of an election we got going on. I mean, I probably shouldn't have went there, but there's so much negativity. And I preach this mindset stuff to my daughter, and so I always kind of break it down to those like the old Bugs Bunny cartoons where you had the angel character on one shoulder and you got the little devil character on the other, and that little devil character is just talking. And we watched a movie here the other night called Ball, and for me the whole climax of the movie was right at the end. The main character is at the free throw line, and he was fouled shooting a 3-pointer. So he gets to shoot 3 shots. He makes the first one, ties the game. The second shot wins it. As he's getting ready to release the ball for that second free throw, he sees his mother. And there was a scene from earlier in the movie where his mother told him that Native Americans always have a way of screwing things up. And he missed the shot. So now it comes down to making this final and third free throw. And he sees his mother in his mind again, and she says, I just don't want to see you fail. I don't want to see how far you will fall. And then in his mind, he just looks over at it. He says, let's find out. So right there, he silenced that negative voice, and he's like, let's just find out. And he made that third final free throw, and then in the movie, they win the state championship. And so that's why I was telling my daughter, I'm like, you see that scene, you see that, pay attention to that. That's how the negative mind chatter affects. It made him miss that free throw. But if you can correct that thinking, if you can silence that negative voice, you can win a championship.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. One of the things that one of the principles I've learned, and maybe you can talk to this from a marketing standpoint, success begets success, failure begets failure. When you make, and you talked us off a cliff earlier this spring when we made a not so good marketing decision. My son and I called you up and were like, okay, we um, we basically bought what was overvalued. We were kind of didn't have a lot of options. And since then, we've been able to follow your counsel, and so now we have built up some pretty good equity from our trades this year. But when you make a mistake, when you make a failure, what's the quickest way to recover?
I think it depends on how bad the mistake is. Um, when you make a mistake and you lose money, I mean, that's it. The money's gone. The best thing you can do is learn from it and not make that same mistake again. That's one thing I feel like sell by marketing really shines is it does give us control in the marketplace because the only thing we can control is what we replace with. We can't control what the market does up or down, but we can control what we have in inventory and we control the buy. I mean, if the price of cattle's getting too high, we just simply quit bidding.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning to exercise that control, I feel like is key. It's one thing that, over the last year or so, I've really been trying to hammer home in the marketing schools, doing more mental exercises during the schools and things like that. But years ago, Jared, and this is a bad name for it, but when something went wrong, I would do what I called an autopsy and go back and go, okay, where did I make a mistake? What did I miss? And never make that again. And I remember Clay Connery asked me this question once on his Working Cows podcast. He's like, is there ever a time you don't make money on a pen of cattle? And I said, if I screw up or I have high death loss and I don't screw up. I did that the very first pen of calves I had when I learned sell by marketing. They were gaining weight like crazy, and I thought, oh man, if they're gaining 3 pounds a day on this little backgrounding ration, they're too good to sell. And I kept them too long and made them undervalued, and never made that mistake since.
Yeah. Yep. Came back to I think the Ray quote hunt from yesterday. Somebody asked him, how did you get so much experience? He said, by making mistakes. No. How do you keep from making mistakes? He said, experience. How do you get experience? By making mistakes.
Yep.
So it's not so much that we avoid all the failures. Otherwise, we live in a cocoon and we don't really live. So, well, this has been great. So we've had so far 64, about half of the participants. I'm going to leave this up for about another 5 minutes, and then we'll queue up our next speaker here. Results so far, again, profitability, same as last time, is the number one concern. And maybe we'll just, what we'll do is we'll have one final question here for you, Doug, and we appreciate you taking the extra time to be here. I'm sure you've got cattle to feed and things to do. We'll ask that question, and then we will all take a quick break, be back at the half hour. So with profitability, this is the final question. With profitability being the number one concern, and we are in a record high commodity market, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? What are the indicators that you see that says, hey, here's some red flags, or are there?
In profitability, you mean?
Yeah, being that in this cross section of people, and it was last time in the August summit. And sorry, I don't know how to bring the questionnaire back up. Um,
I still have it on my screen.
yeah, I'm not sure. This is kind of new to me, so if anybody else knows, put it in the chat how you do that. But um, so yeah, I guess does that make sense? Restate the question. If
Yeah,
profitability
no,
is our
yeah,
number
no,
one
that's
concern right now, what's that going to mean if the overall cycle goes down, costs stay high? What do you see?
that's to me, it's a systemic thinking problem that is just handed down from one generation to the next in this business. Um, like you just mentioned, the market going down. I love market crashes. My best trades always happen during market crashes. And like on the stalker side, we're selling pounds and we're buying pounds. So it's always making sure that the ratio of dollars to pounds on those trades is in our favor. We control that on the buy end, just identifying the relationships between an overvalued animal and undervalued. So to me, the profitability thing, when you learn the marketing, is an easy one to take care of. And sell by marketing isn't new. I've done a lot of research into it, and I found that J.C. Penney did it in his stores, way back in the late 1800s, and he taught it to Sam Walton. Sam Walton uses it. Well, he's gone, but Walmart and Sam's Club stores use it there, only they don't call it sell by marketing. They call it vendor managed inventory. VMI is what they call it. It's the same thing. Real estate does it. They call it BRRR. It stands for an acronym of buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and then repeat. And that's sell by marketing on rental houses.
Yeah. So bottom line is there's always opportunity, right? We don't have to think, woe is me, the market's falling. It's like opportunity. The
Yeah,
market's
it's
falling.
and it kind of ties in. And I guess I got 2 points, and then I'll shut up, Jared. But I like to study some of these guys that run real successful businesses. And Forbes had a survey that they released on the top CEOs in the world, and they found that those guys read 60 books a year. They attend almost 2 dozen conferences a year, and they spend all that time investing in themselves, sharpening the axe. That's why they earn 318% more than the average worker, is just because they spend the time developing the mindset and the skills and searching for new ideas. Uh, the other thought that I had in my head was, talking about this market crash. And it seems strange to me that sometimes after marketing school, most people leave and they're fired up. I mean, they're ready to go home and start trading, but there's always just one or two that just, I don't know what happens if the market crashes. And I always hear 2008 or 2015, 2008, 2015. And it really kind of finally hit me this summer that we're dealing with trauma.
Hmm.
Those market crashes did something really bad to those operations. And the reason those operators haven't been able to move on from 2008 or 2015 is they're dealing with the trauma that those market crashes created for them. And like I said, because of sell by marketing, my memories of 2008 and 15 are much different.
Yeah.
For me, those were really good years to generate cash flow and expand.
Yep. Again, based on where you're at, being able to see the reality. Um, what Kirk talked about yesterday, I'll share that with you, Doug. I think I'd be interested to see. But what he said, a lot of times we don't see it because we have so much negativity stacked up, it actually blocks our vision. And we get in that fight or flight mode. And so we're very reactive instead of being proactive and looking around like, hey, there's actually a lot of opportunity right now. So, well, Doug, awesome. Thank
Perception.
you so much.
Oh, yep.
We surely appreciate you being here. I shared the QR code here. I guess that's the other way to bypass the system if you don't see it is you could scan that if anybody wants that. But we've got a good segment. About half the people have filled that out. I appreciate it. So Doug, yeah, give Doug a big round of applause. Send him some love in the chat, some appreciation as we've been doing. Share what your takeaways are. Hope to catch you again on another one, and absolutely attend one of Doug's schools. I mean, if you're in any part of the livestock industry, I mean, it is a great investment. Um, very reasonably priced for the value that you get. Uh, Probably should be charging about 5,000 for your school, I think, because it's, man, it talk about the value that we walk away from. So
I, I've never had an objection to the price. It's always, why do you always have to have them in Beatrice, Nebraska?
that is a challenge. There is not a good
Yep,
way to fly into
yep,
Omaha and rent a car. So
that's right.
yeah, or
Thanks,
long drive.
Jared.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.